The forest's deep quiet ripped apart. A child's desperate cry echoed, not an animal's call. Elias Thorne, his face lined with old battles, was already moving. His aged body carried him forward with surprising speed. He paid no mind to the distant shouts of park rangers, their voices sharp with command. He had heard something they missed. He had seen things they could not even imagine. Hours later, as twilight deepened, a sleek black SUV pulled up to his secluded cabin. A man in a dark suit stepped out, a badge gleaming in the fading light. "United States Secret Service," the man announced. The quiet night suddenly felt very loud. Elias Thorne, at 72, was almost invisible in the small mountain town of Havenwood. People knew him as Old Man Thorne, a man who lived alone near the vast Blackwood National Forest. He had fought in Vietnam, serving 3 times. His eyes, even now, were sharp, like a hawk's. He could spot tiny changes in the leaves, feel shifts in the air that others never noticed. These were skills learned in war, skills that had saved many lives in jungles far away. Now, his only friend was Buster, his old border collie, whose fur around his nose was white with age. Neighbors kept their distance. His quiet watchfulness made them uneasy. Some whispered he worried too much. Others simply felt uncomfortable with the deep, knowing look in his eyes, the look of a man who had walked through dark places most could not even dream of. They just called him unusual. One bright autumn afternoon, a wave of fear swept through Havenwood. 6-year-old Lily Peterson, the granddaughter of State Senator Evelyn Peterson, was gone. She had disappeared during a family walk near Whisper Creek. Her parents, busy setting up a picnic, had looked away for just a few moments, and Lily had vanished. The thick forest seemed to have simply taken her. Soon, helicopters buzzed loudly overhead. Park rangers spread out in teams, their search dogs sniffing at Lily's bright yellow jacket. 3 long, painful hours passed without any sign of her. It was as if the ancient trees had simply pulled her into their depths. Elias heard the news at Miller's General Store. He was buying his usual coffee and Buster's dog food. While others talked about the sad news with worried faces, Elias quietly paid for his items. He picked up his strong, twisted walking stick and slipped out of the store. He walked into the woods with a silent, firm stride. He knew exactly what he was doing. Deep inside the forest, where the official search teams had marked their grid, 2 young park rangers saw Elias. He was stepping into a forbidden area, moving with a quiet sureness that bothered them. "Sir, you can't go past this spot," the taller ranger called out, his voice sharp and demanding. "This is an official search zone." Elias did not even break his stride. "I've tracked harder things than a scared child," he replied, his voice rough but steady, holding the calm knowledge of decades spent in wild lands. The 2 rangers exchanged looks, clearly scoffing. Their faces showed they thought, "Just an old man, crazy." The second ranger, younger and full of barely hidden pride, added, "We certainly don't need an elderly person getting lost out here, too. We have enough trouble already." Elias simply walked around them, as if they were nothing more than obstacles in his path, barely acknowledging their words. He knew their strict ways, their eyes not trained to read the forest's subtle messages. They searched in straight lines. The forest, however, curved and twisted. Elias wasn't looking for obvious clues. He was searching for tiny differences, for what was out of place. The faint scent of crushed wild mint, a single loose pebble on a smooth rock, a twig snapped in a way no animal would. He moved like a silent shadow, his senses alive to every whisper of the wind, every small rustle in the undergrowth. 2 hours later, far from the loud calls of the organized search parties, he found what they had missed. There, beside a narrow, winding creek, almost hidden by green ferns, were tiny footprints, not clear shapes but small disturbances in the damp soil. And then, caught on a thorny blackberry bush, a small torn piece of pink ribbon, part of Lily's hair tie. These were signs invisible to eyes that weren't trained, a quiet trail only a true tracker could follow. He knelt, studying the almost unseen clues, putting together Lily's frightened path. By dusk, as the park supervisor's radio ordered the main search teams to return, Elias stepped out from the rapidly darkening shadows. He was carrying the child in his arms. Lily was very thirsty, shaking uncontrollably, but she was safe. No cameras flashed to capture the moment. No applause greeted his arrival. Only hard stares from the park rangers, who clearly did not appreciate being shown up by a civilian. One of them muttered, loud enough to be heard, "Should have left it to the professionals." Elias did not answer. He just held the girl tighter in his worn, faded jacket, comforting her until her shaking slowly stopped. He then gently handed her to a paramedic, his face showing no emotion. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the growing darkness, leaving behind a confused and resentful official search team. He simply wanted to be home, away from the questioning looks and the unspoken accusations. That night, Elias sat on his creaking porch, sipping his strong black coffee. Buster, his loyal border collie with a graying muzzle, curled faithfully at his feet, his soft snores a comforting sound. The familiar forest sounds wrapped around them, owls calling questions that would never be answered, the distant howl of a coyote. A ranger's truck drove by slowly, its headlights purposely sweeping across Elias's property, a long, silent stare from the officer inside. No official had come to thank him. No one had even called to say they knew what he'd done. It was as if Lily had simply reappeared on her own. The next morning, at the Havenwood Diner, Elias sat alone at his usual corner table. The talks around him became strangely quiet when he entered. A waitress with blonde hair whispered to another, "He just wants attention?" He probably made the whole thing up himself. At the next table, a man in expensive hiking clothes chuckled. "These old soldiers always trying to live their past glory days." Pathetic, really. The local newspaper, the Havenwood Herald, had a small article on page 3. "Child found safe after day-long search by park rangers." Elias's name was not in it, not even mentioned. Meanwhile, his neighbors, people who had lived next to him for 15 years, now walked across the street to avoid talking to him. A few openly criticized him for going into federal land without permission. "He could have messed up the official search," said Mrs. Henderson, who had once brought him Christmas cookies. Online groups called him a crazy old vet playing hero and attention-seeking. Some even suggested he might have hidden the child himself just to find her later. Through all of this, Buster whined softly beside him, sensing his master's quiet pain. Elias just scratched behind the dog's ears, his voice gentle. "It doesn't matter, boy. She's safe. That's all that counts." At the ranger station, a private meeting about the civilian getting involved was held. One young officer suggested writing Elias up for stopping an official search operation. The supervisor slammed his coffee mug down. "He made us look like we didn't know what we were doing. That's not how things work here. We are the professionals." No one in the room talked about Lily's tiny voice saying, "Thank you, mister," when Elias carried her out of the woods, or how she had held onto his jacket, not wanting to be given to anyone else. That night, a big storm moved through the valley. Rain beat against Elias's roof, finding a leak that dripped steadily into a pot in his living room. He climbed up alone to fix it for a short time, his joints hurting with every step on the ladder. Later, with the fire crackling in his stone fireplace, he sat in his old leather chair and opened a faded green book. Inside were names, many of them, soldiers who never came home from the jungle. He traced his fingers over them one by one, a quiet way to remember those the world had already forgotten. 2 mornings later, mist still clung to the pine trees like ghostly fingers. A sleek black SUV with government plates pulled up to Elias's modest property. The gravel crunched loudly under its expensive tires, a sound so out of place it made Buster alert, his old ears perking up. A tall man in an impeccably tailored dark suit stepped out. He looked around with practiced ease, then approached the porch where Elias sat calmly carving a piece of cedar. "Mr. Elias Thorne?" the man asked. His posture and bearing instantly told Elias he had a military background, even in civilian clothes. Elias set down his knife. "That's me." The man produced credentials with a practiced flick of his wrist. "Special Agent David Monroe, United States Secret Service." Elias raised a skeptical eyebrow. "You took a wrong turn somewhere, son." The agent's stern expression softened into something resembling genuine respect. "No, sir. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." He handed Elias a cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax. "This is from someone whose life you touched profoundly. She asked that you read it personally." Inside was a handwritten note on heavy stationery, emblazoned with the Senate seal. "Mr. Thorne, I'm told you found my granddaughter when all others had failed. The Rangers explained how you tracked her for miles through terrain they considered impossible. Lily speaks of you as her forest angel. You have my eternal gratitude and have earned a debt that can never be fully repaid, though I intend to try. With deepest respect, Senator Evelyn Peterson." Also attached was a printed letter, an official commendation acknowledging Elias's actions and expertise, signed by both the Department of the Interior and the senator herself. Enclosed, too, was an invitation to Washington, D.C., to be honored at a private ceremony at the White House. Elias looked up, his expression unchanged. "I didn't do it for recognition." "I know," Monroe said, his voice gentler than before. "That's precisely why you deserve it." Within days, news had spread nationwide. Vietnam veteran tracker rescues senator's granddaughter using skills military taught him 50 years ago. The twist that captured America's attention? Elias had declined the medal. Instead, he asked for funding for the local search and rescue volunteer team, which had been struggling for resources. The internet exploded with support. Comments flooded in from across the country. "Real hero. This is what America stands for. We see you, sir." At the ranger station, an uncomfortable silence reigned. The same officers who had mocked Elias now quietly signed a petition supporting the SAR funding initiative he had proposed. Their supervisor, red-faced, approved official cooperation with Elias's tracking workshops. Senator Peterson herself appeared on national television, her voice breaking slightly. "Sometimes we forget that heroes walk among us every day, asking nothing, expecting nothing. But Mr. Thorne represents the very best of America, not just for what he did for my family, but for how he did it." That Friday, Elias returned to the woods, not as a ghost to be ignored, but as a legend to be followed. 4 young rangers waited at the trailhead, notebooks in hand, ready to learn what only he could teach. A month later, as autumn gave way to winter's first breath, the Blackwood National Forest unveiled a new sign at the main trailhead, carved in sturdy oak and protected by glass. "Thorne's Watch, in honor of those who never quit." Children paused for photos beside it. Tourists inevitably asked, "Who was Elias?" Locals now smiled with pride as they told the story that had become their town's defining legend. Elias never moved to Washington. He turned down book deals, interviews, and speaking engagements. Fame held no appeal for a man who had found peace in solitude. But every morning at dawn, he walks Buster along that same trail where he found Lily. He's no longer alone now, often accompanied by aspiring trackers, veterans seeking purpose, or simply people drawn to his quiet wisdom. He always pauses at a certain bend in the path, looks up at the towering pines, and whispers something only the forest can hear. Perhaps names from that faded journal, or perhaps a promise to keep watching. At the first snowfall each year, Senator Peterson's granddaughter sends him hand-drawn cards. Her artwork improves with each passing season. Every card ends the same way. Thank you, Mr. Elias. I still remember your coat smelled like pine and safety.